Hi, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you all to the special address on how to succeed and flourish in turbulent times with Ravi Venkatesan. Ravi is a business leader, author, and social entrepreneur. He's currently UNICEF's Special Representative for Young People and Innovation, also the founder of Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, and serves on the boards of Hitachi and Rockefeller Foundation. Ravi was the chairman of Microsoft India, Bank of Baroda, and Humans India. He's the author of Conquering the Chaos, Win in India, Win Everywhere. He was voted one of India's best management thinkers by Thinkers 50 and Microsoft's Alumni Hero 2020. As we proceed to Ravi's session, do not forget that there is a leaderboard activity that has already started. So make sure you participate in it and win exciting prizes. So without any further ado, please put your hands together for Ravi Venkatesan.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share a few relevant ideas from my newly released book, which is called, as you can see, What the Heck Do I Do with My Life? And today's talk is taken from the subtitle, which says, How to Flourish in Turbulent Times. Now, the cover of the book, if you can see closely, has a dinosaur. And T-Rex here is a metaphor for Charles Darwin, who famously said, adapt or perish, or more precisely, he said that in nature, it is neither the strongest nor the fastest that survives, but the one that is most adaptable to change. And so all of you know the story that, the dinosaur extinction 65 million years ago. An asteroid crashed into the Earth and it created such an extraordinary amount of change in such a short period of time that 75% of all species were unable to adapt and they became extinct, including, of course, dinosaurs. But at the same time, some creatures, some plants, some animals were able to adapt to the new conditions, the new normal, and they began to flourish. And amongst them were our ancestors, the early mammals, which quickly became the dominant species in the world. So my reason for telling this story is that periods of extreme and sudden change pose what is called an adaptive challenge for us. And it results in binary outcomes. Those who can adapt, flourish. Those who cannot adapt, perish, which coincidentally is the title of my first chapter. And right now, we are living through such a period of intense change. I keep repeating to as many people as I can that the world is going to change more in the 21st century than in all of human history. Think about it. That's a staggering fact. And this time, the change is not driven by some external factor like an asteroid, but by forces that we ourselves have unleashed. One of them is obviously technology, and we're all witness to the changes driven by tech. Then there is the backlash of all our bad behavior, our unsustainable ways of living. And so that's climate change, that's mass extinction, and so on. Demographics is yet another powerful force. In many parts of the world, particularly where the living conditions are reasonable, people are beginning to live much longer. A 100-year life is within reach for many of us. And the first person who will live up to 150 has already been born. And this has consequences that few of us have actually thought through. Extreme inequality is yet another challenge thrown up by capitalism. In many countries, including in India, including in the US, and other parts of the world, extreme polarization and hate is beginning to be a major factor. And with that comes lack of trust. And why lack of trust is particularly important is because it prevents us from coming together to solve the many problems that we face. So all these forces are combining to create a very turbulent, and I would say a sort of a combustible world, a world that has been called VUCA many times. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And some of you may know it's a 70-year-old term coined by the US Army to describe the conditions in war on a battlefield. And that's how it really feels. And this is, of course, becoming, therefore, a bigger and bigger challenge for more and more people with, again, very unforgiving consequences. We've just completed 2 years living with COVID, and we can see the consequences of change. Some countries have been able to adapt to change much better, and they're doing quite well. China is an example, New Zealand, some of the Scandinavian countries. India hasn't coped with change as well. The US and the UK have done quite poorly. And so you begin to see the differences across countries. It's the same with companies. Some companies have been able to adapt to the new normal much faster. They've become more digital. They've found new customer segments or pivoted to new businesses, and they're thriving. But 25% of all businesses, particularly small informal businesses, have shut shop forever. And you're seeing the same bipolar consequences for individuals. So we saw billionaires really do well in most parts of the world. People like you and I, we've done quite okay during COVID because most of us have been fortunate. We could work remotely from home. We still have our jobs. But 250 million people in India alone have fallen back into poverty. So, in my book, I try to lay out what is it going to take for us to adapt and flourish in times like these. And I try to describe the mindset that is required, some of the skills that will be useful, and the strategies that might be helpful to this. Now, my book is aimed very much at individuals, people like you and I, but there are similar significant implications for organizations as well, and therefore for you as HR leaders of these organizations. So let me talk a bit about what is particularly being referred to today as the future of work, the changing nature of work. And I want to focus on two aspects of this particularly. Now, one aspect is that companies are increasingly going to have to figure out more innovative, more flexible work arrangements. The writer Charles Handy some years ago wrote or predicted that there are going to be only 3 types of workers in the world. The first he calls are creatives, people like software architects, product and designers, people who come up with new services and businesses, or content creators. The vast majority of people will fall into the second category, who are called caregivers. And these are essentially frontline workers of different sorts. So think about the nurse, mechanic, sanitation worker, or a maid, all these types of frontline workers. And then finally, you have a few custodians. And custodians are the people who manage work. They manage processes in the company, infrastructure. You don't need many of them, but you certainly need some of them. So increasingly, organizations are going to have a very small permanent core of these types, but most people are going to become self-employed. And we are going to have to access their skill, their talent, their expertise through a variety of contractual flexible arrangements. Now, this is not new news. Over the years, we've seen rising levels of subcontracting, outsourcing, greater use of consultants and gig workers. But through COVID, the phenomenon of remote work and hybrid work has profoundly accelerated these trends. In the US, we now have a major phenomenon which is being called the Great Resignation, which is what? People simply reevaluating their priorities in life, choosing to explore alternative careers and their passions, or simply taking advantage of the skills shortage to increase their pay. In India, we have a very interesting paradox. On one hand, we have the highest unemployment levels since independence. And that includes a lot of young people with higher education degrees. On the other hand, we have a very high skill shortage, and the attrition levels in many, many companies is quite high. And that's particularly true for hard skills like AI or data sciences and so forth, but really it's quite broad-based. Just this morning, LinkedIn released their survey where they're talking about the fact that 80% of people they surveyed, particularly younger people, millennials and so forth, are contemplating changing their job for a variety of reasons. So these issues are there very much in India. And I don't think they're short-term issues. These may reflect the new normal, and it will require a sea change in how we think about organizations, about work, about hierarchies, jobs, and careers. So this is one very broad trend. The second is the nature of the workforce itself. Companies need a workforce today which has very different characteristics from the past. You need a workforce that is adaptable, that is resilient, that's capable of learning new skills. You know, interestingly, even as the levels of automation are rising, what is becoming more important rather than less important are people-to-people interactions. And the reason for that is work is increasingly collaborative and multidisciplinary, and we have to work together to solve complex problems in creative ways. So we need people who are good at working with people. And this is what are called 21st century skills: communication, collaboration, creativity, problem solving, and so on. And everybody needs this. Then mindset is becoming more and more important, particularly two mindsets. The psychologist Carol Dweck has, of course, famously championed what she calls a growth mindset. And Satya Nadella at Microsoft has been, I think, the most eloquent evangelist for the growth mindset. But I'm also a firm believer that everybody needs an entrepreneurial mindset. In the 21st century, not everybody is going to be an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur. But in order to succeed, everybody needs an entrepreneurial mindset, which means what? They're able to see and seize opportunities, that they're resourceful, they're adaptable, they're tenacious, and good at solving problems. Interestingly, this is what I do with the bulk of my time. My organization, which is called GAME, or the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, we and our partners run some of the largest entrepreneurship programs in the world in government schools. We have over 1 million school children from standard 9 to 12 in the state of Delhi, in Andhra Pradesh, and soon, very soon, 4 more states, who go through a compulsory entrepreneurship curriculum. And what we've been able to show in these 2-3 years is entrepreneurship is not something you're born with. It's absolutely a skill that you can acquire experientially. And it has tremendous outcomes in terms of self-confidence, in terms of learning, and in terms of life success. In the 21st century, we also need many more leaders because we have so many more problems and so many more opportunities. But leadership in this century is very different. It is no longer, as most of us think about it, a noun, a title like general manager, vice president, CEO. It's not about power and authority. Leadership in the 21st century is a verb, it's an act. We need more and more people who are able to see opportunities or problems and inspire others to come together to solve these. And to do this not with power, formal power, or somebody giving them a mandate and asking them to do so, but just deciding on their own that this is what needs to be done. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So here's the thing. None of these things I've talked about, the growth mindset, entrepreneurship, learning agility, 21st century skills, leadership, none of these things are taught in a classroom or indeed can even be taught in a classroom. They cannot be learned online. And this is why they're not taught in schools and colleges. They're not taught in corporate learning programs. They're not taught in executive education programs. They can only be learned experientially. And that too, what I call crucible experiences, where either voluntarily or perforce, you take on a big challenge that is completely beyond what you've ever handled before, completely out of your comfort zone. And in the process of making a success of it, you develop the mindset, the self-confidence, and the skills required to take on even bigger challenges. When I reflect and look back at my own career of 35 odd years, the reason I'm here today, the reason I've been able to do many of the things I've done is because of a number of these crucible experiences. For instance, leaving home and going to live in a hostel in IIT and compete with some of the brightest people I've ever met, people who are far brighter than I am, was a crucible experience. Leaving India to go to the US with almost no financial support and making a success of it was a crucible experience. While I was still in my 20s, learning to lead a unionized factory in the American South with race relations was a crucible experience. Coming back to turn around a failing joint venture when I was still about 32 was a crucible experience, and so on. And if you were to examine your own life, your own career, you would also be able to identify such seminal crucible experiences and defining moments when your self-confidence and capability took a big leap forward. So if you're going to develop the workforce of the future, especially leaders of the future, we need to become massively more intentional and focused about putting large numbers of people through these sort of crucible experiences. In my book, I've described a process called Hot People, Hot Jobs, which I've used with great success in organizations ranging from Microsoft India to Bank of Baroda, and you couldn't have two organizations more different. And so I'd encourage you to think about this and apply it in your own companies. This is just one of the many ideas on learning to adapt and flourish in the 21st century. I hope it's been interesting, and I hope it inspires all of you to reach out and read this book. My very best wishes to all of you in the new year. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ravi, for a mesmerizing session. I'm sure our audience has taken down all the key takeaways. Stay tuned and keep the tweets coming using the hashtag #ETHRNextTech. Please visit our partner booths at the exhibit hall to download resources and chat with the booth representatives. Thank you so much.